Let's talk about the apartment market in York, Pennsylvania. Now, on the surface, everything looks pretty steady, right? Maybe even strong. But there is one fundamental shift happening kind of quietly that's changing the rules for everyone. So let's pull back the curtain and really see what's going on. From the outside, you might just see a market that's, holding its own. No major drama. But that calm exterior is actually hiding a huge transfer of power away for landlords and over to renters. A whole new market reality is taking shape, and you can feel it in every lease negotiation and every renewal notice. To really get a handle on what's happening today, we first have to appreciate just how different the entire feeling, the whole mood of the market is compared to just a couple of years ago. I want you to think back to the recent past. Finding a good apartment, it felt like a race. You had to be fast. Landlords pretty much held all the cards, and you just kind of expected that rent was going to go up every year. That was the old normal, a market that was all about intense demand and this constant feeling that there just wasn't enough to go around. This right here, this captures the change perfectly. We've gone from that high pressure, gotta sign now environment to one where tenants actually have some breathing room. That frantic search has been replaced by a much more thoughtful process. You see, more choice always leads to less pressure, and because of that, the balance of power has really started to shift. So what's the engine behind this massive shift? Well, it all boils down to one of the most basic forces in economics, the story of supply. It's a classic cause and effect story. For years and years, the demand for apartments in York was just consistently strong. Developers saw this, of course, and they responded by planning and building new projects. And now, after a pretty long construction cycle, those new apartment buildings are finally opening their doors. And let's be really clear here. We are not talking about a handful of new apartments popping up. This is a legitimate wave of new inventory hitting the market all at once. And there's even more in the pipeline. A wave this big, it's powerful enough to completely change the landscape for everybody. So with all of this new supply hitting the market, how can we actually see the effect it's having? Let's look at the key indicators that really show us where that turning point is. How can we be sure this isn't just, a temporary dip or a fluke? Well, there are two really clear signals in the market that tell us a real structural shift has happened. Just imagine a simple chart in your head, one that tracks rent growth over the past few years. For a long time, that line was climbing, and it was climbing steeply. Rents were rising fast. Then, it started to level off. The climb got a lot less intense. And more recently, that line has started a gentle downward slope. Now, it's not a crash, not by any means, but it is a crystal clear picture of a market moving from rapid growth to stabilization, and now to a slight softening. And at the very same time, we're seeing vacancy rates start to tick upwards. It's totally natural, right? With more apartments available, they just don't get leased up as instantly as they used to. This small increase in empty units is another key sign that the whole supply and demand balance has fundamentally changed. Okay, so the big picture points to a market that's rebalancing. But what does this actually mean in the real world, whether you're a renter, a property owner, or maybe an investor? Now, this is a big one. It's a really common assumption people make. They see some fancy new building going up, and they think, well, that's a different universe. That has nothing to do with my affordable two-bedroom across town. But that's just not how housing markets actually work. The key thing to understand here is the ripple effect. When those new luxury buildings open up, they absorb all the demand from renters who can afford those top-tier prices. That, in turn, frees up the slightly older, less expensive apartments that those people were living in before, and all of a sudden, the landlords of those properties have more competition. They have to work harder to keep their units filled, and that helps stabilize rents for everyone. New supply at the top creates this cascade of options that eases the pressure all the way down the line. So, let's just break down what this feels like. For renters, this shift means you are gaining leverage. You have more choices, more time to decide, and way less pressure to sign the first lease you see. For property owners, the game has totally changed. You're now operating in a much more competitive world where the focus has to shift from just filling empty apartments to actively holding on to the good tenants you already have. And that might mean offering incentives or being more flexible on renewals. So when you pull all of this together, what you're seeing is a market that is now operating under a completely new set of rules. And here it is, the single most important takeaway from all of this. The York apartment market isn't collapsing. It's not in trouble. It is simply finding a healthier, more sustainable balance between supply and demand after a long, long time of being tilted heavily in one direction. This new balance creates a totally different environment for making decisions. It's a market that rewards people who are patient, who do their homework. And on the flip side, it punishes anyone who's still operating on that outdated assumption that rents will always go up no matter what, and that good tenants have no other place to go. And that leaves us with the final question to think about. Whether you are renting, you're owning, or you're investing, this market normalization requires a new strategy. Understanding these dynamics is step one. The next step is deciding how you're going to use that knowledge to your advantage.